Hello, friends. We are here to review Summer House Martha's Vineyard, Season 2, Episode 3. I had to think really hard about that. I don't know how well I did. Y'all cannot tell me that I did not clock tea last reunion about this little weird clique between Summer, Jordan, and Preston. After watching this episode, y'all can't tell me I didn't clock tea. Honey, like, honestly, like, championship game, I literally threw the ball up, honey, and I walked away, and I know that it went into the rim, like, period. Before we get there, we start off the episode, and we are at the aftermath of the Nick thing with, Summer and Jordan, ironically. And it's the aftermath where they're explaining to him, like, when you get, drunk, you get a little bit touchy, and, they are very clear that he's, not a weirdo and not all these types of other things, because obviously that's a weighted thing, and it could be a lot of different things. And they're saying his intention is not bad. We've already talked about this, but they're assuring him that, or reassuring him that, and we kind of move on. But it doesn't really stop him from feeling some type of way. Obviously, that's a rough message to hear, and his thing is still, obviously those are his friends. He says they hang out a lot, they're very open and honest with each other, and for them to not have just come to him and been real and said that also feels weird. So I think it's the fact of, kind of being, that's an embarrassing thing to hear, and it's kind of shocking, but also like to hear from people in this type of roundabout way, I can understand that being uncomfortable. We move on to Shanice, and she's having a conversation. She's going to be having this party tonight, so she's getting ready for that. And she's having a conversation with her mom. It's nice to be able to see, like, pictures of her mom at the very least, and like her sister, just to kind of humanize her and really get to know more about her. I said in episode 1, I was still trying to grow on Shanice because I was not feeling her based on what happened last season, but she is like, it's so ironic that I said that, because she is growing like a fungus, and I mean that in a good way on me. Like, I'm just seeing way more, and I'm understanding she seems really cool, so I'm biting my words. Is that a phrase? I just thought it was funny to hear her mom literally reading Summer, like going in on her, and I'm like, yes, mama, like, yeah, like, I understand where Shanice gets it from. I live. But there was a weird part where she says, because Shanice is like, I'm going to be doing the slip and slide naked. And her mom's like, don't do it unless Alex does it. And I'm like, carry the one, because why? I'm like, why? Like, how does Shanice's mama even really know about Alex? And then what does she know about Alex being? I don't even want to say it. It's so weird. The party looked really fun. Like, I really immediately went back to the finale party that they had last season, which looked so super boring. Like, their finale last season was so boring. But I'm like, oh my god, this like seems like a fun party. I'm like, we're doing the right things. I also thought it was really funny because obviously it was like raining and they were doing all that stuff. And I was looking, as a black person, I'm looking at hair, honey. I'm like, oh my god, the girl's hair. Like, even the guy's hair. I'm like, I would have been out there, girl. I don't play that. Like, I don't have time for that. And it was just really funny because I'm thinking, obviously, it's not just black people that watch this show, and not even all black people really know about weaves and all that type of stuff. So it was just so funny for Jasmine to be explaining, like, this is my hair and this is somebody else's hair. So, if I get my hair wet, baby, it's going to take an extra hour and a half to get her back together. T, like, yes. So let the girls know, please educate. Educational. We love educational programming. It was interesting seeing Shanice's friends pull up. I didn't know what this was going to be. We did keep getting a preview of Jasmine, saying, let's talk about house guests, or, and we knew that she was going to be bringing up the Mariah thing and the Phil thing, which is T. But I'm like, did this kind of start off with Shanice's friends? Did something bad happen? But nothing bad happened. They were just attractive men, and it was one of their birthdays. So that's fun. Like, it seemed like everybody was cool. It was super interesting though to see the boy. I don't remember his name. It was like on the tip of my tongue, but I don't remember it. And he was super flirty with Noelle. Noelle is a star, honey. Like, she is eating it up. But before we give her all her flowers, because I'll be doing that all season, hopefully. So she's flirting with him, and then they kind of do this weird thing where they eat that cupcake together, kind of like Lady and the Tramp style, when they, did the meatball and the spaghetti. And I'm less wondering about the whole act as it's happening. I'm more so wondering, how did we get here? You know what I'm saying? Because I'll be honest, I have my moments where I'm, drinking, assuming that they're drinking. I don't want to put that on anybody, but assuming that they're, you get a little inebriated and you have a conversation, a little flirty chat, funny things will happen, but I don't know how one proposes to eat a cupcake like that. I'm just loving the mess this season, and I kind of live for it revolving around Alex because he was such the quiet one last season. And for me, he was very just like grounding because, like I said, it was my first season of Summer House watching. It was a lot of cast. It was a lot of stuff going on. So like being able to see him just like mind his business and do his yoga and read his books was very like centering. But now it's just so ironic and so funny to see the drama around him this season. And it's like girl drama and it's just tea. Like this, you could not have asked for a better situation. And they're like, I can't believe I put it in my notes like this. They're literally, it's Noelle and Alex and they are chopping it up in the kitchen. And I was wondering about this dynamic because, like I said, she was just flirting with the dude outside and jointly eating cupcakes. And then they're kind of chopping it up in the kitchen. And she's asking him, like, when was your last relationship? And it's giving those teas. And I'm also wondering, again, assuming they're, drinking and stuff. I'm like, is some drink playing, like some liquid courage playing a part in this? I think they kind of joked about that a little bit later. But that was interesting. But the funny part, let's get to it. The funny part is that Summer just because like just happens to have to go and find her phone and literally has to circle the circumference of the kitchen island where they're talking to find it, and it's just very like, I feel you, girl, but she was blocking, okay? But keep your eyes on your piece, girl. Keep your eyes on your piece. This weird, and this happens on Summer House a lot. And I wonder if it's producer based, like if it starts with the producers, or if it's genuinely the cast knowing that they need to do a job. But they always do this thing where they know there's like an underlying thing, and they're like, "Have you talked to so and so about it? Have you talked to so and so about it?" And sometimes it sticks a little bit more because they're talking about something very substantive. However, they're steady talking about this thing where Summer calls Shanice the worst dressed. And that's not a huge deal. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know that oh my goodness, it hurt Shanice's feelings, and then we got her mom reading her. Like, that was enough for me. And we talked about it last episode, and they apologized. And I understand that there's this thing building, this story building between the Shanice and the Summer, but I think that we can kind of let it go. Like it to the point when it gets to the point where it's like, have you guys talked about it? Have you guys talked about it? It's like, oh my God, it's not that deep. But while they're talking about it, because it's Jordan asking Shanice, have you talked to Summer? They kind of get on the topic of Summer being like an acquired taste, essentially. And Jordan, you start to see the cracks in this little crew. Remember, like I said, I'm going to remind you guys, like I said last episode, there's this crew forming between Jordan, Preston, and Summer. And then also Shanice is kind of in there because she went on a Jamaica trip with them. But they kind of seem like the main three because Shanice feels like she's kind of breaking off and doing her own thing. So they're having this conversation, clock that T, is Jordan and Shanice. And Jordan's like, well, yeah, girl, Summer can be a lot. Like, I had to curse her out before we came here because she was like, messing around and hanging with this guy. And it's a little vague, but it's also a little bit like but it's like, yeah, she was giving much in front of my apartment building. And they kind of blurted out what she said, I guess, where she lived. I would like to do some research on that because I would like to know. But, yeah, so she's like, I have to curse her out about that. But, boom, whatever. And I'm like, The next day, Noelle, Preston, and oh my God, who else was it? I can't remember. They're getting groceries and they're in the car basically talking about the whole, Noelle being interested in Alex thing. And she does ask them, like, how would y'all feel if y'all had a friend that kind of messed around with, your prospective piece? And they kind of play it off and kind of act like it's not really tea, but you can tell that that's kind of a building block to the story as well. So I'm living for it. We then learn for the first time that Mariah is coming, and it was not introduced to us as like, oh, maybe Mariah will come, and I'll ask the group about it. Jasmine said Mariah's coming. And then they kind of have a conversation about, it comes up how Bria and Shanice want to bring Phil. And now it's like, oh, shock, amaze. Like, oh my God, a guest? Like, what's going on? And so she's like, oh, well, now we got to have a house meeting to discuss all guests that are coming. So it's a small group of them at this point, but once everybody comes to the house, they got to discuss it. My opinion on it before we get into it, because there's so much. On the outside looking in, not being the affected parties, any of the affected parties, so neither affected by Phil or affected by Mariah, even if I was in the house, both being a viewer and maybe if I was in the house, I can understand why everybody, the affected parties, feel the way that they do. My personal opinion is that both of them, I can understand them having an opportunity to come back to the house in some capacity. That doesn't necessarily mean stay at the house. It doesn't necessarily mean be bunkmates. Maybe just come do an event or whatever. I think that there's a way that they can be involved, both of them, because in my opinion, what they did, very, very wrong, absolutely. But if they are in the position of, meaning Phil and Mariah, if they're in the position of they want to come and correct that, then I think that we should see what happens and then go from there. My personal opinion from the outside looking in. But I also understand if Bria says she don't want Mariah around, then Mariah shouldn't be around. And I also understand if the group says they don't want Phil around, then Phil shouldn't be around. I'm of the stance of, okay, I have my opinion, but I'm not necessarily in it. So I am looking for the aggrieved party to tell me what they want to do. And however they say they want to move, then that's how I'm going to move. Hopefully that made sense for everyone. Given that context, so that we have the house meeting, Jasmine opens this up like, how do you guys feel about Phil coming? And it seemed like mostly all of the guys, I think it was all of the guys, were essentially like no, because basically he did get into it with all the guys. And there was a moment where we get into later where he really kind of affected Preston in a way that I don't think we got to see. And I don't think it was explained very well this episode either. But we'll get to that. And then Jordan was obviously very adversarial because she got into it with him as well. She describes it as they almost got physical. My response to that is maybe more happened off camera that we did not see. We do get context though from Bria that he's not staying in the house. Like he's coming at the same time that they're there and he has his own house. He would just be like participating and stuff. So it's not like he's going to be staying in the house. I do think that that's an important point to make. But obviously everybody's just very up in arms about the Phil thing. I do wonder how, again, my response to what they're saying is maybe more happened than we got to see, because everybody's saying like I'm so uncomfortable with him being here, like he gives bad vibes, blah blah blah. What he did was very cringe, very crass. His attitude was very bad, but I also take into account that he was drunk. And not that that's a bad point. If somebody gets drunk and they're aggressive to the point that he is, then yeah, maybe he shouldn't be around. But also that could have been an isolated event. That doesn't necessarily mean he acts like that. I'm not defending him at all. These are just the questions that are running through my mind. Because I'm trying to figure out, I wish I just knew more specifically what the concern is. For me, as a viewer, trying to understand what these castmates are saying, I want to understand what they mean by uncomfortable with him being in the house, or bad vibes. Like, I want to know specifically. That's just how I feel, because I'm a viewer and I want to have a full plate of understanding, and I just don't feel like I have that. And I'm really not trying to say that I don't feel like they're justified in their feelings. They have their feelings. Is if you have a feeling, then you're justified in having that feeling. I'm a viewer though, and I'm analyzing, and I don't have enough meat to analyze why this Phil thing gets everybody so irritated. I can understand him being annoying and crass and doing the wrong thing and disrespectful. But it's funny because when I'm thinking about it, it's taking me back to my review from last season, and I just felt like they just didn't like him and they didn't want him around. But I don't know that those mean the same thing as being uncomfortable, is what I'm saying. Is it that y'all just don't like him and he's annoying, y'all don't want him to be there, which is perfectly fine? Or is it that he's genuinely inappropriate and makes y'all uncomfortable? That's perfectly fine. But what is the uncomfortable thing? That's all I'm wondering. Like, what is it? Phil ain't staying in the house. But then we get to the Mariah thing, and everybody's immediately open to her staying. And that just turns me off, because it feels like a punch in the face, as Bria said, because nobody's considering the fact that she did actually throw something into Bria's face and get into Bria's face. So, and I'm trying to make sure I characterize it properly, because that's just how person I am, and nobody's really taking that into account, and I just think that that's weird. And Bria exits the conversation, but she also, she kind of stays in the kitchen, and Jasmine's like, well, I talked to her, she said that she's going to be cool, whatever, blah blah blah. And Bria's like, okay, I trust you. So I feel like that was Bria being the bigger person, but of course she's not going to get any acknowledgement for that. We move on and see that Preston is super upset, like crying a bit about the Phil thing, I guess. And he was explaining, he hates being the only gay person in the house. And I was just drawing context clues. And, I'm like, okay, well, obviously something happened where he feels, offended based on his sexuality, but nobody else can relate in the house. Fine, I understand that. And, I did, I understand the clip where he said, "Don't be soft to Preston." I can definitely understand how that would rub Preston the wrong way and offend him. I 100% understand that. So I'm one. What it just did, it never read that to me though, right? And we didn't get to hear anything about it. So that's why I'm saying is like when it comes to somebody like Preston, and he feels specifically like he feels uncomfortable with him being in the house, that made sense to me. But when it started to make sense to me, they cut it off, and we didn't really get to hear anymore. So I would have loved to hear more context if there was. Maybe there wasn't anymore, but I would have loved to hear more from Preston about that experience, because that is a very real experience of being like the only gay man in the house and just kind of feeling like you're being disrespected, and there are these microaggressions based off your sexuality from these straight men. That's extremely real. So I think that would have been a great conversation to hear more about. And while that's happening, Bria and Shanice are talking to Phil on the phone, and Noel joins. And Phil was saying, like, I think he's cool with Mariah. He's like, I talk to Mariah all the time, and we already made plans to kick it out there. Like, she already has a flight. Jasmine bought her flight. Like, that was a gay. Like, she already had a flight. Like, baby, she was coming anyway. And so I'm like, oh, like, I really hadn't even expected that plot twist, honestly. Like, I'm like, oh, wow. So while they're getting ready to go out, Jordan is, having a moment with Summer about the fact that she's losing her hair, and she's getting overwhelmed, and she explains, like, obviously wearing wigs before was kind of voluntary for her. She would do it when she wanted to, but now it's like this weird necessity. So I can understand the mental toll that would take on you when something like that changes and your life is changing, as Summer is explaining. So I can understand that being a overwhelming thing for her. And I'm wondering if, I haven't seen much yet, but I'm wondering if that's affecting her interacting in filming this season. They get to dinner, and they're having a good time, but I like that Bria was direct. She was obviously very upset. I like that she was direct and asked Jasmine, like, was it premeditated that Mariah was coming? Like it was Indian, Jasmine's already very defensive, and so I like that Bria was kind of still calm at this moment. And she's like, well, I'm just trying to see, like, was the flight already booked? And we get the receipt that the flight had been booked 5 days prior to them having the house meeting. So I do think that that's shady, as Bria later characterized, because you're having this house meeting as if you're giving, a heads up, and you're trying to make it a house decision, but you had already decided. And I knew before Jasmine said it that she was going to use the BS of, well, it's a flight, it could be canceled. Like, if everybody thought it wasn't okay, then I would have canceled the flight. No, girl, because you already pressed the gas. Like, that's shady, and you should not have done that. Bria then starts to explain the thing that she learned from Phil, that, he was going to be linking up Mariah, like he had plans with Mariah. And everybody immediately started screaming, like, he's not coming to the house, he's not coming to the house, including Jordan. And I'm just like, it's just so hard not to be irritated with Jordan. I'm like, why are you screaming? But she did save it later, but we'll get there when we get there. But girl. So she's screaming. Bria's not really trying to hear it. And she's like, what I'm trying to explain is, if he pops up at things outside of the house with Mariah, by way of Mariah, it's by way of Mariah. It's not because of me and Shanice. Like, I don't want the blame over here. If he's popping up, it's because he already had plans. That's all she was trying to get out. So from her getting that out, I appreciate that Jordan was then able to break it down to Jasmine and say, girl, at the end of the day, you had already bought that flight. And if they had done the same thing, meaning Shanice and Bria, if they had done that same thing with Phil, you would have thought that was shady. And she's like, you're obviously not considering Bria's feelings in this, because she actually was affected. And Jasmine isn't. And she's not really trying to get to that point. She even says in her confessional, like, the thing that Mariah did only affected one person in the house, and I don't necessarily think that that's fair. No matter how many people it affected, it's not popular rule for who can come back into the house in those type of situations. She did get into Bria's face, and she did throw something at her. And like I said, I would feel like she should come back. I would hold that opinion too. I'm not holding that against the cast, that they want her to come back to the house. What I'm holding against them is that Bria has said no. And whether you agree or not, she said no. And it doesn't affect y'all. So I don't understand why not comply with that. Mariah ain't there right now, and y'all are having a good time. Mariah wasn't there for the rest of the summer last time, and y'all had a good time. Bria said no. Bria is a cast member. She's a house guest. It is what it is. And go talk shit about Bria behind her back if you don't like it. But I don't understand fighting for Mariah to come when somebody has said no. And I don't know why Bria always has to defend herself, but then she becomes the one that runs away from conversations. Preston, I caught that shade. Bria, Preston is not your friend. Clock that T. I don't understand that. because y'all always, I feel like they always put Bria in a space where she has to be defensive, and then when she's not trying to be defensive, she retreats, and that becomes a read as well. That's so weird to me. Like, stop gaslighting this lady. Is Bria annoying sometimes and very dramatic? Absolutely, but she gets gaslit by this group a lot. And even in Jordan's moment of being annoying, I'm glad that she could acknowledge that they don't consider Bria's feelings. So another prompted conversation, Amir asks Summer now, like, have you talked to Shanice? So he broaches the conversation between the two of them, which I'm like, this has to be producer based. Like that like, why are they pushing for this conversation? But they end up having a conversation. You know, Shanice gives her side of it and why it affected her, and they kind of like make up and kind of apologize. But you can still, there's still a weird tension there. And when Summer is trying to like kind of cover up for it, for lack of a better word, I guess, I think that I think they were having a genuine come to Jesus conversation. But she uses a really bad example to say like, well, girl, I wasn't saying you look bad. Like, you have the best body here. And I will say, Shanice does have a very nice body. I hope that doesn't come off offensive, but I was thinking that as well. Like, when she was getting ready for the party and she had on that bathing suit, the like nylon yellow one or whatever the hell, neon yellow. I was like, oh, her body's really nice. So I agree. But it's a bad point to make because then it kind of puts everybody else down at the table. Even though you're just trying to give her a compliment, like, it kind of pulls everybody else into it and creates another comparison. And the comparison thing was the issue in the first place. So that was bad. Everybody at the table, not everybody, but mostly everybody starts laughing because I think that they were like, that's a bad way to put it, just like I just said. She's like, well, I'm being serious. Like, this isn't a laughing thing. And that's when I'm like, summer is summering. But I'm like, I always just wonder, are there drinks involved? Like, are drinks causing some of these emotions to be heightened, or is that kind of how Summer is? It seems like the narrative is that's kind of how she is, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And in the midst of that, Jordan kind of like checks like, girl, who's laughing? Like, what issue is it? And she's like, they kind of start a little spat. And I'm like, more cracks in this little clique. Like, I'm like, when you have a clique of irrational people, it's going to crack. Like I said, Summer and Shanice do their apologies. Jordan and Jordan and Summer, they really kind of end up nowhere at this point. Bria's leaving because she's over it. And like I said, Preston threw that shade at her, which I was just like, Like, I really like, I like Preston. Like, I really do. And I just be like, we're trucking along. But he just has these very weird, what do I want to call it? Like, I don't know. This weird, just like underlying tension with Bria. Like, I just feel like he really can't possibly like Bria. And I don't know why that's not being pulled to the forefront. And Preston, to me, the way that I've been seeing it, he seems like when he doesn't like somebody, he kind of almost pokes a little bit and antagonizes. And it's very annoying for me to see him take the position of, when they're having conflict in the group and having conversations, because it feels like it's more heightened when it involves Bria than it is when it involves other people. And at the end of the day, realize what show you're on and realize that you're going to be having these conversations. It's fair that you don't like conflict, but I think that there's a bias there. It was also very telling that when Summer is having this type of thing with Jordan, you know, they kind of separate because I think Jordan ended up going home too. She immediately goes to Preston and she's like, was I wrong? Because they have this clique. And you can tell that I'm reading that it seems like between the three of them, Jordan, Summer, and Preston, sometimes Jordan and Summer kind of bump heads and Preston kind of plays that middle. It kind of seems like Preston favors Jordan, but that's just what I'm reading. So she's asking him to acknowledge, like, was I wrong? Like, are you gonna hold some accountability for Jordan? And she says explicitly then, like, y'all allow Jordan to be mean. And I just like, if I could, this chair does spin, but if I could spin this chair around 360 without knocking everything over right now, the way that it's set up for me to film, child, I would have spun 7 times. Because I clocked that last episode. I'm like, they really have like this mean girl clique. And it's weird because it's weird because Summer is now being out-meaned and she's asking for Preston to mediate. But I'm like, that seems like it's the common thread of y'all's clique, is to be mean and to antagonize people. And now that it's infiltrating your group, you don't know what to do. T. This last part was crazy. Like literally, they're at this club that they went to the night before. It's probably the only place they can go, but you know, whatever. And Alex is flirting with some girl, and you know, Noelle starts feeling some type of way, rightfully so. Like I said, when you have a feeling, you have every right to feel that way. Is it rational? Who knows? But it's a feeling. So have your feelings. And you know, she's feeling some type of way, and they talk about it in the bathroom. Jasmine says the same thing, like, girl, you have a right to feel some type of way, but she, you know, I like that Noelle was able to acknowledge, like, you know, I was flirting the night before, so, you know, maybe this is irrational. She ends up having a conversation with Alex about it, and it's crazy how the way she describes her feelings to him, like, well, you know, you are single, but I still want you to consider me. She just starts to sound, obviously not verbatim, but she starts to sound like Summer. It's the same type of situation. It's crazy. And it was interesting that Alex, that was like his initial response. He's like, you know, I've been in this situation before where people have very unrealistic expectations for me. And he did kind of not pass he kind of passively let her down, but I think that it was more so attributed to, similar to Summer, it wasn't that he wasn't attracted to her and he wasn't interested in her, but it just kind of, like he said, it was a red flag. Like having these expectations at this point is a red flag, and also the fact that she's friends with Summer, so all those things tied in, it's a dub, it's a no. I'm like, oh, this is tea. Like I felt bad for my girl because I really like me some Noelle, but I think that she was tripping. Coming from a fellow girlie that trips when it comes to the boys, I get it, honey. But as a friend, you was tripping. Noelle's my friend in my head. And then to close this all out, we get back to the house and they're getting out of the car. Again, assuming they're inebriated. And Jordan is I believe Alex is in the front seat. But again, it's Preston, Jordan, and Summer. They're in the car. Summer's in the front trying to get out. She's kind of in and out, in and out. And she's having this back and forth with Jordan. And Jordan, to me, seems like she's kind of talking to Summer kind of condescendingly, because she's using this tone, and I feel like it's the tone that's upsetting Summer. And while Summer's trying to explain herself, again, it's very choppy and it's the end of the episode, but it seems like Summer's trying to explain herself from a feeling standpoint, and Jordan's being very almost kind of like cold. That's the way I interpreted it. And she was just kind of like being weird and condescending in the way that she was responding and cutting Summer off, and it was upsetting her. And Summer was asking, again, she's referring to Preston, like, cut in, cut in, cut in, because Preston's not saying anything. And again, I get the impression that in this group of three, Jordan and, you know, Summer, they go at it, and Jordan kind of goes off the rails. I'm sure that Summer has the you know, the ability to go off the rails, but I feel like Summer feels like she gets held accountable more than Jordan, and so she's looking for Preston to play that middle, and he's not necessarily a middle. He's kind of like a leaner over to the Jordan. That's my impression. And when I came up with this Mean Girl Clique last episode, I didn't know where it was going to land, but look at where we are now. So I just might be psychic. I'm interested to see how this plays out. I really am. I'm enjoying this. This is a great season. See y'all in the next one.